Welcome back to the Gruber Morning Show. This is the Tesla Roadster podcast. I'm Pete Gruber.
I'm Mark Schaffner. Good morning and welcome.
Yeah, and this is a podcast that specializes on Tesla's first car, first generation Tesla, which is a Tesla Roadster. We'll talk a little bit about its origin today, and it was a Lotus Elise. So there's some Lotus in this DNA, and in my opinion, it's still the best-looking Tesla in their lineup today. It's sporty, it's a two-seater, it's a convertible, and a load of fun to drive.
And I think we may even have some time to talk about some Lotus stuff today as well. So looking forward to it.
So one of the things I wanted to pop up here, guys, is VIN 180. This poor Roadster is sitting in San Francisco on a street, and the first time we showed this, it had weeds growing up through the wheels. In fact, at one point they said the weeds were growing up over the hood in some places, and somebody must have pulled them or trimmed them. VIN 180 is what this car is. It is a twilight blue Roadster. It's got a beautiful set of tan seats, and you can see it. Now, this is Mel C that is posting this, and the most recent post regarding this is that a friend of his said that the tags were expired in 2020. So the question is, has it really been sitting for 4 years now? Possibly, I suppose.
Possibly.
Tom Greiner chimed in and he says, I know who owns it. He said he will reach out to them and see if he can get it resurrected. Well, we also think we know who owns it, or at least owned it at one point in time. And last week, I made a couple of calls, left some voicemails, basically beseeching him to consider rescuing this Roadster. You know, let's get it off the street. Let's get this thing back in play. Let's at least, put it in someplace safer than out in the street. We've had no response to that request. And if any of you know anything about the car, the goal at this point is let's get this Roadster back home somewhere, and somebody that can appreciate it, put it back in play, and clean it up a bit.
Well, and it's that, to me, the tan seat color interior, along with that twilight blue exterior, that's probably my favorite combination on a Tesla vehicle.
Yeah.
As of right now, anyway. Close second is going to be the black interior and twilight blue exterior.
We have one that's in the shop. It's twilight blue like this with the pale yellow seats. And you're right, it's unusual, it's different. People usually chose different types of seats for the twilight blue. Again, if you're joining us, let us know where you're coming in from. If you like, tell us what your VIN is, your Roadster VIN. Everything in the Roadster world revolves around VINs. And we'd love to have you chime in and participate. The picture behind us, of course, is artificial intelligence. That's what we do. And what I asked for here was a new studio in a Tesla production facility. Now, this wouldn't have been in 2008. This would have been more recently, because you can see all the robots and arms. The Tesla Roadster was mostly hand-assembled without a lot of robotics like this. Which is typical for small run cars. But
I'm wondering, and you might be able to tell me, you look at that Tesla logo underneath the table, right in the center of the screen.
Yeah.
Is that an accurate Tesla logo?
You know what?
I don't think it is.
I think it's a variation, yeah.
I think it's a variation on Tesla's logo.
And it's one of those...
There's an extra line there. So
okay, that's what I thought.
there's only one line above the T, usually.
And that line above the T is not split typically either.
Probably one of those things they call cognitive dissonance. You recognize it, but you can't quite put your finger on what's different about it, and you guys just pointed it out. Thank you. And it looks like a Tesla Model S or something in the screen there. But so that's what we use. We use AI. We'll talk about our use of AI with Tesla service later on. It's definitely useful, and we'll give you some more feedback about that. One of the things we wanted to lead with was, Jesse, if you can go to the images folder, look for rodent damage and final edit. There's some images there that I'd like to bring up. And we have been talking about rodents getting in Tesla Roadsters and thought it was an anomaly a year or so ago, but they keep coming. We've got another one now that's got rodent damage, and so we'll have some tips for you here as far as precautions. But one of the things that I wanted to address, and as soon as Jess brings up the image,
Which one you want first? Does it matter?
bring up number 1767. And this has to do with the post on one of the other Facebook sites regarding some seatbelt fraying. The suspicion is that somebody was using the seatbelt aggressively and had worn into the fabric.
Right.
Well, I can assure you that material is very robust and durable, and it's very difficult to get any fraying just from use. What we have found is the rodents eat this stuff. And you might say, why? Well, if we go to image number 3, Jesse, you'll begin to see why a rodent would be interested in gnawing through something this tough. Image number 3 shows a nest. And when rodents get into your car, they don't just simply live and watch TV or whatever they do in your car. They actually decide to have a family at certain points in time. And when that happens is they need cribs, they need beds for the offspring. And they have to make those. They can't go down to Target or, the furniture store and buy that sort of thing. So they end up looking for things to gnaw that can create nesting material. And a good analogy is birds. Same thing.
Sure.
They're flying right now. We've got them flying through Gruber Motor Company outside, and they're picking up stuff to make nests with. But apparently, the seatbelt material is one of the things that they can gnaw through. And this isn't the first time that we've seen this on this car. There probably have been 3 of them over the last year where we've had rodent damage, and they've even gone into the seats, the wiring harnesses, sometimes pieces of carpet. So you name it.
Yeah. And when you say periodically for families, I'm thinking for rodents, like every 3 weeks.
Right. Yeah. Right. So, yeah, the rodent damage thing is definitely something that has become a thing. And what happens is when you have a car, a Tesla Roadster that has rodent damage, on the surface, it looks like you've had a malfunction in the electronics, like one that came in a couple of months ago, wouldn't drive anymore. The console was dead, the VDS screen, and it looked like an electronics problem. It wasn't until we dug into the console that we realized, rodents have taken up residence, chewed up wiring harnesses, and left their destruction, a path of destruction in this car.
Well, and what I understand is that you've talked about this, and your guys have talked about this. They say they'll chew on the copper wires to sharpen their teeth. They'll chew on the insulation because being soy-based, it can be digestible for them because it's a grain-based. Now we know they're chewing on seat belts and other fabric items in the car, not to eat it, but to make their nesting materials out of it. This car and the car has all kinds of nooks and crannies and things that we would not have thought of until we saw the first rodents coming through.
Yeah. So this one with the console damage, we opened that up, and sure enough, there were nests in there, and we repaired the car, fixed the wiring harnesses, fixed the VDS screen, and the car went into test drive mode. Well, it wasn't until I turned on the heater, we test everything in the car, that I realized, my God, this thing has a nasty smell. And brought it back the next day, and they opened it up further, went into the dash, and found out that, the picture that you saw, the nests that were in there, and what they chewed through with insulation was a GPS antenna, which is something that hadn't been tested yet in the car. So we didn't realize that there was further damage beyond the console.
Sure.
But I don't know if I have a picture of this, but there is a product that the service manager was showing me. If you can bring that up, Jesse, it's called rat tape. And apparently they have a particular type of tape for wiring harnesses that, if used, will stop rodents from chewing through it. There we go. And it is literally called rat tape. The picture that you see there on the tape shows an aerial view of a rodent. And the claim is that if you use this tape, that since it is impregnated, the adhesive is impregnated with red pepper, that the rodents will stay away from it. Apparently they don't like spicy food.
Interesting.
I wonder if the same is true down in Mexico, come to think of it now. They would probably prefer this type of wiring harness, although there aren't that many Roadsters in Mexico that I'm aware of. Sorry, I deviated there. It's just a speculation. But
what is the name of that little mouse that was on the cartoons when we were growing up?
oh, Pepe, I think.
Well, you can't forget to show the mouse out that you have over there too.
The mouse, okay. Let's see here.
You know, do you have it next to you, the can of mouse out?
Oh yes, we do have that can of mouse out. While Greg gets that.
Yeah, that's it. Mouse out, and it is a rodent and rust prevention spray, so it's a dual-purpose thing. This was actually sent to us by one of our viewers, George, with Rich Rebuilds. And yeah, it does a number of things. It repels rodents. It's peppermint scented, made with essential oils, and it also stops corrosion, displaces moisture. It's long-lasting, minimal drip. So there's something else that has been recommended. Although people in the industry have also claimed that Febreze, those little things you put in the dryer to soften up your clothes, apparently rodents don't like that either, and they may just stay away.
I was thinking of Speedy Gonzalez, by the way.
Speedy Gonzalez, okay.
Yes.
So the write-up on this tape includes capsules containing red pepper extract, which is hated by rats. Wrap on wires and pipes for long-term deterrent effects.
And I'm sure that they want you to wear gloves as you use it.
Most likely, yeah. Don't rub your eyes after
Don't rub your eyes. Yes.
All right. Have another item here for you, and we've got an image here that we can bring up as well. Jesse, this is the World Traveler picture. And Rafael de Mestre is back in the news. Last interview I saw with him, and I wish I had saved it, was in Australia. Or it was the Australia Tesla Club, one of those two. And what he was saying is that his VIN 507 is en route right now. Let me get my mic over here. And let's get this a little bit larger so I can read it better. There we go. He is waiting for his car so he can continue his travels. And part of that is a relaxed visa program in China, which now allows someone like him to go through the country for a month or two, I believe it is.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
Okay.
So some of the restrictions have been lifted. But what he says is we invited him to join the Tesla Roadster Owners Group on Facebook. And he says, thank you for inviting me to the most precious Facebook group of pioneers. Most of Tesla Roadster owners got close friends the first day I met them. Remember, he came to the United States. His car came here first. He followed. And then the Roadster community stepped up to the plate and made him feel very welcome in the United States, all the way from Florida up to Nova Scotia, to the Delaware Club, and then Seattle, Washington. He says, thank you all for changing the world to a better one. I enjoy driving Roadsters. Hope to meet all of you someday at a HPC or an event. My Roadster is currently in South Korea, waiting for a ship to be transported to China on 2/24/24. So the 24th, what is that? 4 days from now.
Yeah.
I will cross China again with my Roadster after 12 years and tell you what changed. You can see this at www.80edays.com, all one word, 80edays.com, and on Facebook, 80edays. And then we'll be able to see him live with his travels. Raphael carries every possible connector, outlet, charge cable in the trunk of his car. He had so many of them, he actually left a few of them at our shop to be picked up at some later date, I'm sure. And he was describing to us over dinner one night how he would get a charge on his Roadster. And he said the first telltale sign when you're in some remote area is you start looking for telephone poles with electrical lines on it.
Yes.
And then you basically follow those to a destination. And he found that some of the best success he had was at restaurants because they usually had heavy load type equipment, burners, hot plates, that type of thing, hot water heaters, definitely. And sometimes he would be able to convince them to let him open up their circuit breaker panel and tap directly into their power sources if they didn't have the type of outlets that he needed. It had to be quite an adventure because I think every time you stopped, you had to get rid of range anxiety at that point. Because remember, Roadsters, unlike other Teslas, when they haven't been charged for a while, actually go dead.
Yes.
And if that happened in, the backwoods of Afghanistan, you're in a world of hurt because you got to ship it somewhere.
Yes. It's, I love the story that he told us when he was a guest on our podcast. And he would say the same type of thing. I would look for the power pole. I'd look for the power lines. And if it had been a long day and it's getting to be on to evening, when I saw a transformer on the power line, I got excited because a transformer means somebody lives there and they're going to be power branching off.
Right.
And so he would turn wherever the transformer was and follow the line up to the house.
Amazing. And, he seemed to have developed a confidence that is unusual. Most people get range anxiety when they're away from charging infrastructure.
Yes.
But he just proceeded and continued to travel. And I asked him one day, weren't you concerned? He says, nah, always found power. He was very confident. It was amazing.
Yeah, he says if there's roads, there's power. It's not a big deal.
Right.
A couple of people have joined us today. Shafi2626 says hi. Well, thank you for joining us. ZBD Beatbox has a question for us as well, saying, how quickly will transportation and logistics industries fall apart? The idea is AI driving and Tesla Optimus Gen 2.
Predicting the future is more difficult than it seems because it's such a rapid change.
Yeah.
I'm sure that those industries that you mentioned will be affected. How it will play out is anyone's guess, or at least I'm in the dark about that. I know it's coming, but good question nonetheless.
It is a good question. I don't know that I would be confident enough to predict when, but I remember, growing up, there was train tracks about a quarter of a mile from our house, and we'd hear the train going. It was the Burlington Northern Canadian Pacific Railway from Canada down to the southern U.S. So it was a main route 30, 40 times a day. And I still remember you see the engines, it'd have 2 or 3 or 4. A lot of times there'd be 2 engineers in the engines. The train is a mile long or so, and you have a caboose with somebody in the back as well. And then nowadays, there are no cabooses.
Why? I didn't know that.
There are no cabooses. They don't need them. They replace the caboose, and the guy or lady that sat in the caboose to help manage the back end of the train with an automated, basically an automated sensor.
Yeah.
And so there are no more cabooses.
Oh my God.
There are.
So they don't do braking from the rear anymore?
They don't do braking. They do, but they have something automated to take care of it.
Yeah.
And for engineers, they have typically, everything is so automatic on the engines that in many cases, railroads will only have 1 engineer on staff. Now, the engineers don't like that. They feel like it's a labor and safety issue.
Sure.
But the railroads typically will have these long trains. Instead of a mile, they now go up to 2 miles plus in length, running all those engines and running everything, and they just have 1 person doing the whole thing. It's all the technology.
Yeah, yeah.
And how long before some sort of AI truck is out there taking something from a train depot, multimodal, getting loaded, and then going to its destination with nothing more than a person to program the destination when the transfer takes place?
Or even driverless.
Yeah.
And that programming takes place in a control room somewhere.
Yeah, programming takes place in control room somewhere. Everything is driverless, and it's a little scary to think of, but I can see that in our future. I don't know when.
Well, in our AI podcast Wednesdays, we usually talk about jobs that are going away, and that's one that hadn't even occurred to me. That happened before AI, I'm sure, the caboose.
The caboose happened before AI, but the logistics and transportation is going to be affected by AI a lot.
Thanks for the great question, ZBD Beatbox.
So I got one more from ZBD Beatbox. He says, the robotics replacing humans isn't worrying anyone, it seems, but I think it will replace all humans.
Well, there's an optimistic viewpoint that goes along with that. Now we're getting into the AI podcast,
That's
but
okay.
let's go for it. We have the question. With the elimination of jobs, there are some notable people that are already predicting that within the next decade, that half the jobs may be gone and half those people may be on unemployment. But we're also headed, it seems like, for an age of abundance where humans aren't going to need to work anymore, where currencies will go away, and there will be plenty for everyone. Now, I'm not sure that's going to happen in my lifetime, but it's certainly an optimistic, utopian viewpoint that might reduce or at least eliminate some of the problems that mankind has faced all along. For example, bank robbers will be out of business. Why would you go rob a bank? There's no money in there. There's no more currency.
Yeah, everything has gone cashless.
And if you have everything you need, why would you go take somebody else's stuff? You can get what they have, or more.
It's an interesting and intriguing concept. If we look back at history, we found that this is not the first time people have said that. People said, with the advent of the Industrial Revolution, you're going to have machines to do all your work for you. You're going to have one person running a machine that does the work of 20 people. So you're going to have all this production, and you're not going to have to work as many hours as you used to. At the same time, guess what? We're all here 45, 50 hours a week doing work.
Well, and then we got computers, and we needed programmers and coders and, and people to build them, I suppose.
I think the change is going to be there. I'm a little skeptical on the idea that there will be no work, because part of what gives a lot of people their sense of worth is the ability to do work, and they're going to go out and they're going to find and invent things, and that will make our lives better as well.
So we're really talking about impact. Will have to be defined, and we'll have to figure out what that will be. Jesse, I've got another image for you. It's called VIN 691. I got an email this morning from a UK customer, Roadster customer, new to Roadsters, by the way. And he says, go back here and get the, all right, there it is. All right. He was saying that our podcast, the last podcast, I popped up this Roadster for sale in the UK. It wasn't on our Roadster matchmaking site, but I said, any of you interested in what looks like a really clean, very orange, carbon fiber optioned, low mileage Roadster? This one is at an auction site in the UK. Well, the following day, apparently, this customer contacted the auction site, bid on the car, and won it.
Oh, wow.
So he's now the owner of this beautiful Roadster. And he then asked us, can you please update the census program? New owner, here's where I live, that type of thing. And he also said, is there anything that I can do to determine what the condition of the car is outside the spectacular exterior condition? And I sent him an email this morning. I said, well, absolutely. We have a free log file, analysis program. All you have to do is we'll send you a newsletter, show you how to extract the log file in your car. You just simply email that to us, and then one of our software engineers in the Roadster group will do an analysis and tell you what the history of the car is, what's going on underneath the hood, and if there are any pending problems that may be beginning to reveal themselves in the log file that haven't hit the vehicle display screen yet. So anyway, he will... I'm sure he's going to respond to that. There's a different time zone there, so he's probably sleeping right now. But we have a new Roadster owner. It's VIN 691, and he is very excited about being able to drive his right-hand drive Roadster around the UK.
Well, first, congratulations on your new Roadster. You have purchased a truly beautiful car. And I remember seeing one of the very orange Roadsters that came from China that were in a condition where the PPF wasn't. The paint looked about like that. And I loved the car and loved the colors. I did want to point out too, the log files. This is it's kind of unique to the newest generation of cars. I don't think it's unique just to Tesla, but I know that because we're more a Tesla shop than anything else, we take advantage of these log files and the ability that these cars have to diagnose themselves and get to us. Anytime a car comes in, one of the very first things we do is pull a log file.
Hmm.
Every time, because a customer will give us a symptom. That symptom might be 2 or 3 or 4 or half a dozen things. We pull a log file. The log file narrows down what it is that it could be, and it helps guide us with use of our own knowledge base as well as the Tesla documentation as to exactly what's going on and what we're going to need to do to fix it.
Mm-hmm. This is probably a good segue into the project that you've been working on, along with the rest of us here, of developing a Roadster GPT.
Absolutely. We're combining what we have in artificial intelligence with the information that our guys over the years have developed as far as their knowledge.
Cause-effect relationship.
The cause-effect relationship.
Versus fixes, yes.
Yeah. So when our guys do work on Roadsters, and when they do work on Model S's as well, it's not just a case of car comes in, let the car software diagnose itself, go troubleshoot based on what the diagnosis is, find the problem, fix the problem, send the car out. There's another step that's very important that our guys are very good at doing and have for years. They'll do those steps and then they'll document. Here's what happened, and here's what we did to fix it, and here was the result. Mm-hmm. That has, over the years, we've developed a fairly robust knowledge base of here are the types of things we can do or that we have done in the past to fix this type of problem. Mm-hmm. ChatGPT from OpenAI has proven to be an amazing tool for us. It started when Tesla released its Roadster documentation. We took the PDFs that Tesla released and said, hey, we have the subscription and we've heard that you can create custom GPTs. So we dumped the documentation into ChatGPT. Lo and behold, 10 minutes later, it had parsed through, 1,400 pages of PDF documents, and we had a viable GPT going.
10 minutes later.
10 minutes later.
Very important concept.
Oh, I was blown away. And being just as blown away, I then took over the course of this last week and simply downloaded or put into a GPT readable format our knowledge base that we keep internally. And we actually have 2 different knowledge bases that have been kept up. One is an engineering style knowledge base kept by our lead engineer, Ken Kaplan. It's basically just a simple comma delimited file. Another is a knowledge base that is a little more robust in its capabilities for people to interact with. It's actually a little bit newer, but it is based in our CRM system. And it's on a database file, an old style DBF file. I was able to extract the relevant fields from both of those, put them and load them up into the GPT, and within 5 or 10 minutes, they were ready to go. Mm-hmm. So that's such a powerful tool.
It had digested years worth of data collecting, cause-effect relationship, symptom versus repair analogy. And within minutes, like you said, AI was able to not only insert that into a usable instant format, but also combine all of our knowledge along with all of Tesla's knowledge that had been released and collected.
Yeah. Oh, and it's exciting to see. And our viewers don't. My background is tech, much more than it is finance. Mm-hmm. And when I see something that would have taken me hundreds of hours to program, just go dump document, come back, it's done. I am just blown away and impressed. I'm like, okay, well, I'm glad I'm not a programmer anymore because I'd have been out of a job.
Another one of those, yeah. That's how we end up using. It's a great diagnostic tool. The advantage, you might say, well, this certainly is something that we're excited about because it helps us enormously. But there's an advantage to the customers, and we need to talk about that. In a normal repair process, there's a length of time required to do diagnosis, and that is billable.
Yes.
Customers pay for that. When we have tools like this available that in an instant can give us options for repair, that saves the customer money.
It does. And we're not only doing this with the Roadsters, we're also beginning to do this with the Model S's, because while our primary business is still Roadster business, we're getting enough staff and getting enough throughput coming through the company that we're able to start working on that backlog of Model S's. And that's important to us too, because we know that in the next probably 2 to 3 years, we're going to see a tidal wave of Model 3s and Model Ys that are coming off a warranty that need to have fixes, and people don't want to take them to a service center either because it's too expensive or it's going to take too long. And then we're going to be able to stand in the gap and fill that in. So having these knowledge bases, not only for the Roadster, but also for the other models, the S, the X, and the 3, and the Y, is going to be very important to us in our future.
Sure. There's a very good question here from Karabna Jack WZ. We're talking about, of course, this Roadster GPT that we've developed and are continuing to evolve. He says, will it be available connection to documentation to all people? Well, OpenAI has actually created a AI store for this very function, and it's not just our program. It is anyone that wants to develop an application and then wants to sell a subscription or in some way monetize this. Now, why would we want to monetize this, you may ask? Well, it has been years of data collecting. It has been programming that we've done. It's our CRM, for example, that is handling this type of information for the techs currently at GMC was all custom developed.
Right.
And we have an enormous amount of expense in developing these tools. So yes, we do plan to, at some point in time, to make it available through the OpenAI, what is it called, Jesse? Store or something like that?
So yeah, it's just the OpenAI store.
Yeah, it's just store.
Okay, so there's an OpenAI store. We will make it available, and I think it will be something that will be very valuable to any type of service organizations. Now, that begs another question. What about the new data that is being collected? You know, Ray Johnson's site, for example, on Facebook. Those guys have been doing a great job, and you're going to ask me what that Facebook site is. I'm just going to say Ray Johnson's site. Right?
It's the BMS U_018/U_029 users group, or something like that. That's pretty close.
You got pretty close.
It's pretty close.
But my point here being is, guys, you can take all that data that's being collected, feed that into one of these custom GPTs, and make that information instantly available. There have been a few times when I've been on Ray's site and I said, you know what, these guys were talking about a certain problem, and then I have to scan way down, and most of the time I don't find it.
Yeah.
With this type of a harvesting into a custom GPT, that information would be instantly available.
Yeah, so there are some questions that we have to answer before we can put a timeline out.
Yeah.
For example, what happens when one of our customers uses this information, finds it useful, and adds to it? How do they communicate that back to us in a way that we can curate it, verify it, and then get it into the GPT? Other questions. What about online forums? What about those have been the traditional ways of searching, is getting in things into online forums or Facebook groups or something like that. What can we bring into the GPT without violating individual copyrights or something like that? Right. So there are some questions like that, as well as questions of how do we potentially keep bad data out. That's kind of the bane of the existence of some of these online forums, is people will feed bad data in, sometimes with ill intent and sometimes with innocent good intent. They said, well, I tried this, I think it'll work. And what they tried was something that's either unsafe or doesn't work, or both, or
Or pure ignorance, yeah.
or just
Yeah.
ignorance, and they don't realize it, and then that thread takes off and goes its own way.
Yeah.
So there are lots of things that we have to kind of figure out with this, but the prospects are so exciting.
But we're working on it, guys. Yes, we are. So here's another news item. This is the Lotus Type 135 vehicle. And Jesse, if we can pop that one up. Let's see here. You know what? I don't know if I have that image available here. All right. Maybe not. What I wanted to preface this particular portion of the Tesla Roadster podcast with is the relationship between Lotus and Tesla is much closer than most people realize or think. Not only was the original Tesla Roadster a Lotus Elise, it also, a lot of the engineering expertise at the time the Roadster was developed was not at Tesla. It was at Lotus.
Mm-hmm.
These were the people that had been building sports cars for decades, that had the engineering talent, that had a supply chain that was up, running, and active. And Tesla actually paid it was a monthly surcharge to Lotus for a while that actually gave them access to some of this type of information, like their supply chain. And of course, the styling in the Tesla Roadster was originally inspired by the Lotus Elise. The reason I say inspired, the goal originally was to take a Lotus Elise, leave the engine out of it and transmission, the drivetrain basically, and ship empty gliders over to Tesla to have them electrify with the AC propulsion system EV drivetrain.
Mm-hmm.
It turns out because of logistics and a whole bunch of reasons, that was not successful. So Lotus actually built the first Tesla Roadsters at the Hethel, UK plant, which also gave, of course, Lotus some expertise in building EVs.
Sure.
Well, Lotus's DNA has always been extremely light, highly efficient, small sports cars. Simple, easy to work on.
Mm-hmm.
And they actually have continued with that tradition, of course. Like most companies, ran into financial problems here and there, were bailed out by Geely, and currently they have funding. And this particular article is actually describing a new EV that they're coming out with. Matt Windle will make some comments here in a while. And Matt was the original plant manager at Lotus during the Tesla Roadster project. He's still there. In fact, he helped us with some keys at one point in time, a couple of years ago or so. Very helpful and nostalgic about the Tesla Roadster because the Lotus people do feel a sense of ownership for that car, even though they get no credit in the market. Everybody thinks it was Elon and Martin, and they. So anyway,
Or they think it's a Porsche.
yeah, they are working on an EV, not the Evija, which is that $2.2 million car, which kind of got derailed during COVID. Although it's a great concept, it's the car with the holes in the sides.
Yes.
100% EV. Love to have one, but it's not in production currently. So they are after the Lotus Emira, which they had just launched. They say work is already advancing on an all-electric model that ultimately will replace it. It is currently known only by the internal design code type 135, so it's going to be called something else. And by the way, something else important here to note. Have you noticed that all Lotus cars, names, brand, or starts with an E? Evija, Emira. That is a tradition at Lotus. So I'm sure that this Type 135, which is currently kind of like Dark Star was at Tesla and White Star, which became Roadster and then Model S, will eventually have an E in the name somewhere. It will be a successor to the Elan and the Elise. And they say, whereas Lotus plans to engineer its SUVs and sedans in Germany and produce them in China. Now, this is a change.
Yeah.
This particular brand of vehicle, this 100% EV Type 135, will be developed in the UK, in Hethel. the longtime home of Lotus. And initially alongside the Emira, which they're phasing out. That's an internal combustion engine car. A friend of mine in town here just bought one, and he's pleased as can be. He's waiting for final delivery. It's at the dealership here in Phoenix.
That's fantastic.
So they say that this sports car will be the first model to use Lotus's new LEVA platform, LEVA, and that's an acronym for Lightweight Electric Vehicle Architecture. And what it combines is a bonded aluminum structure with a so-called chest battery mounted behind the passenger compartment rather than under the floor. Now, doesn't that sound like a Tesla Roadster?
It sure does. I was impressed, especially that they say the chest high. Yeah.
Yeah, right behind the passenger seat, no flat, floorboard type batteries. And then they go further. A cast aluminum subframe behind it serves as the mounting point for the control arm, rear suspension, and the motor. Well, in a Tesla Roadster, that component is steel.
Mm-hmm.
In this vehicle, they're actually doing a cast aluminum subframe, similar to the giga castings that Tesla is doing.
Sure.
It's reduced weight and probably less labor intensive since it is a cast part.
And since it's a cast part, it's likely going to be as strong as, if not stronger than, a steel one would have been.
Yeah. So while reading this article, thoughts were going through my head. Well, Tesla is trying to build a second generation Roadster. Is it possible that Lotus is actually going to beat them? Possible. All right.
Possible.
So they say that the Type 135 will use a single axial flux motor producing up to 470 horsepower. It was 288 in the Tesla Roadster, so it's going to be a lot more power.
Yeah.
Driving the rear wheels, again, a rear-wheel drive. Power now will come from a 66.4 kilowatt battery pack. Well, the original Roadster battery pack was 53. The 3.0 upgrade is actually 80 kW.
Yep.
They say that the LEVA platform will also support a brawnier twin motor all-wheel drive configuration, but that's being reserved for a larger and more expensive model. The rest of the article talks about the Lotus design goals, simplified with added lightness. The Type 135 version will be the lightest and simplest to classic Roadster qualities. Although the mass of the battery pack means it will weigh more than its gasoline-powered predecessors, the Type 135 is still anticipated to come in at least in less than 3,300 pounds, 2,700 pounds for the Roadster.
That's and they say that it's going to be a coupe to start with, which is of course going to be a little two-door, and
with a roof on it, basically.
Yeah.
And then that's in 2025, and then later followed by the Roadster, which is the same convertible configuration that the original Tesla Roadster has.
I mean, you've got horsepower to weight ratios right now that are getting close to what motorcycles have.
Yeah.
You'll get a motorcycle that weighs 600 or 700 pounds and has a small engine on it, as much as 1.5 liters that can produce 100 horses. And here you've got 435 horse, you said, in 3,300 pounds. That's like a really high performance motorcycle would be, which tells me this car is going to be stinking fast.
Yeah. They talk about Renault, with its subsidiary Alpine, is also planning on using the LEVA platform as a basis for its next generation electric sports cars, one that the company hopes to sell in the States. And they talk about the name. As for the name, that could be hiding in plain sight given the British brand's need to start every model with the letter E. Add that to LEVA, and you get Eleva, which means to raise in several Romance languages.
I could see it.
So now here's an interview with Matt Windle, who is currently the plant manager at Lotus. Oh, I think he changed his title. We're going to get into that in the article here. He was plant manager, and I think he's been promoted into another capacity. They say that the pace of change has been massive at Lotus. And the difference around the site and its preparation, we're talking about Hethel now.
Mm-hmm.
But it's not just what you can see on the surface. It's IT systems, high voltage systems. They didn't have enough power apparently coming to the Hethel UK site, which, by the way, was an old RAF facility during World War II.
Oh, goodness.
It was later on converted to or purchased by Lotus to build sports cars. They've also redone all the roadways, they say. They have a new staff restaurant, and they feel it was really important bringing the business up to date, ready for the next challenges. So now they're talking to Matt Windle, and they're asking him, can you describe the state of the UK car business, which Lotus is part, and increasingly a large part? He says it's difficult as it's ever been. It's not just COVID, but Brexit as well. Forgot about that, right?
Yeah, I don't even think about that, but yeah, that's probably true.
He says our cost of dealing, cost of invoicing, and logistics have gone through the roof, worsened by fuel costs because of the war in Ukraine and inflation.
Sure.
So it's as hard as it gets, but we're still smiling. We're still trying to go strong. And I think the element that is positive for us is the strength of our order book. So strong for the Emira, particularly. That's the last of their ICE cars, sports cars. And he says that gives you the confidence that you just need to keep fighting through these issues and keep going. And you may have also heard, he says, we've had a little bit of political turmoil at the moment. You can kind of come to Britain every 6 weeks and see a different prime minister.
I like that. Kind of. kind of,
yeah.
huh?
So the outlook for us as far as relationships with government and things is shifting as well. But that's where I can see Lotus blossoming, that we are having those interactions with the government now.
Yeah.
They talk about their strategic plans. They're going to become first volume sports car manufacturer in the first volume force. No, I must try that again. They are going to become the first volume sports car manufacturer in the world that commits fully into going battery electric. Remember, how many sports car EV manufacturers are there?
Well, you've got of the high end, there are a whole bunch. McLaren, Porsche, Lamborghini, and Ferrari. Those are four I can think of that are bigger names right off the top of my head. You've got there'll be Bugatti. Lotus is up in that class of car, and they're the first mass-produced one that's going to go to EV.
Volume is the key word.
Yeah, it's the
and affordable cars. Just think of what these cars are costing. To buy a Rimac, $2 million plus.
Yes.
To buy their Evija, $2 million plus.
Yes.
The Koenigsegg. I mean, the list goes on and on.
It really does. And even if you have the relatively quote unquote inexpensive Porsche, you're still talking $300,000 to $750,000 easily and up.
They say that the Lotus Emira is going to be their last ICE or internal combustion mass-produced production car. And that aligns perfectly with their goal now of going into zero emissions and into this green economy.
Yeah.
So then they are asked, Matt Windle is asked, what is Lotus's future? Well, he says, we've taken over 10,000 orders for the Emira. And a third of those are coming from the United States.
That's cool.
We launched the car just before Goodwood last year, and between then and now, we sold more cars in 1 year than we sold in the previous 6 years combined. So yeah, as far as sales goes, it's very strong.
I'm so glad to see that they have a hit on their hands. And for a company like this to commit to EV is exciting.
Yeah. So let's throw up a picture of a Roadster here for a moment. Jesse, this one is 2024-02-19.
And then while that one's pulling up, let's we've got Karabnajak WZ talks about the Lotus saying fast and expensive, which they probably are. And then Muhammad Abbas has a question for it. He says, does the hydrogen engine going to replace the electric vehicle in the future?
There are a lot of opinions about that, and I have my own, and I'm just going to share my opinion. No, it would be foolish to go back into plumbing and gases and the high maintenance that comes with something like that. And if you look at the infrastructure that is being developed around the planet, it's all about electric vehicles, charging stations.
Yeah.
How many hydrogen fueling stations do you see being created?
You don't see any, and that's part of the biggest problem with hydrogen right now, and where I think EV battery electric is going to be our future instead of hydrogen. I'm very intrigued about hydrogen fuel cell technology. Hydrogen combustion, I think, is dead. I don't think that'll ever take off. There's not enough energy in hydrogen to make a realistic fuel combustion engine that will get you any distance without having a massive hydrogen tank and all of its associated risks. Fuel cells that drive a smaller electric motor are far more efficient than a hydrogen combustion engine could ever be. However, there's no infrastructure.
Right.
In California, Shell is pulling out. They're one of the few places that has hydrogen filling stations, and they're actually pulling out of the marketplace in California. And so the few people that have hydrogen cars are legitimately asking the question in California, what am I going to do?
Yeah.
They don't know.
While I agree that it is a extraordinarily clean technology, the byproduct is water, basically. It's no longer carbon-based, type emissions, carbon monoxide, all of those, harmful things that are coming out of ICE engine tailpipes. But it's kind of like the evolution in the audio world, Betamax versus VCR.
Yeah.
They had to make a decision at some point, and they did.
Yes, absolutely. And, more recently you had HD DVD versus Blu-ray. And at some point manufacturers were trying to go one way or the other. And finally there became a preponderance of, Blu-ray is going to be it. And the next thing you know, there is no HD DVD.
Yeah. One won and the other one lost.
So, hey guys.
Yeah.
So during the 2024 Miami Boat Show, Yamaha introduced their hydrogen outboard engine to the boating industry. So it sounds like they're starting to look into hydrogen. They're having problems, I guess, with EV motors and I guess battery and weight with the boats and the smaller vessels.
Yeah.
So it sounds like they're going to try to lean towards hydrogen first, and then maybe circle back around to electric vehicle or electric outboards later.
Interesting. Yeah.
That's very intriguing. Thank you for that insight.
Absolutely. So the picture we threw up here, and I wanted, since we're on the subject of roadsters, and we need to get back to roadsters a bit. This is a 1930 American Austin Roadster as seen on the Twilight Zone TV series. And apparently it was made from, this was a series in 1959 to 1964. But you can see a Roadster typically is a small sports car, convertible typically, two-seater. And this is what inspired, I'm sure, Lotus to build a Tesla Roadster, or at least their sports cars.
Yeah, and that's a neat little car, and I'm a huge fan of the series. They're back in its day. And I don't know of an equivalent series today like it. In the 1990s, you had Seinfeld, where everybody who was a star eventually got a guest appearance on Seinfeld as some sort of character. In the 1960s, Twilight Zone, pretty much if you go through the entire 5 years, you're going to find a who's who of Hollywood coming in as guest stars for these individualized episodes.
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Interesting tidbit.
So it is, but that's a great picture of what a Roadster would look like and why they're a smaller sports car. Karabna Jack WZ has another comment for us. He says, I don't know how they think to produce all the power needed for electric cars. I'm an electrical engineer, so we don't have in Europe the power systems that are enough for an e-car. Infrastructure is a great problem.
We've got a video on that, released 2 years ago. Will the grid be able to keep up? We were surprised doing the research that the utilities are way ahead of that curve. Earlier in the podcast, before the Roadster podcast, we spent an hour talking about EVs, and one of the topics that came up was a solar farm that's being created here in the United States, in Colorado. And massive amounts of power will be available, and that's just one site.
Another thing that we didn't talk about last hour, but I have read about in the last week, has to do with here in the United States anyway for power grid. Do you remember a few years back, Pacific Gas and Electric in California was telling people we are going to have rolling brownouts because the climate's changing and we don't have enough power and blah, blah, blah. Notably, 2023 in the United States was hotter than that year was, which was, I think, 2018 or 2019. And there were no brownout issues. There was nothing that made the press.
Yes.
The reason why is that there is a very large battery and solar combination installation in Southern California. This battery and solar installation has come online in the last 3 or 4 years as part of California's massive expansion of solar energy. The California renewables in the last 5 years have increased fourfold, and they produce almost 25% of California's energy now. A fairly significant PG&E natural gas power plant went down in the middle of the summer near Riverside, California, I believe is where it was at, in the Southern California, where there are that community, if you want to call it that, is somewhere around 30 million people. And I was near the height of the heat, and there were no rolling blackouts and there were no issues because the solar that had been added to the grid had made the grid robust enough that they could simply handle the energy.
Amazing. Yeah.
They were running batteries into the evening during the peak hours that had been charged that day on solar. And then overnight, they were transitioning back to their standard grid as demand diminished. The grid is much more resilient than we thought it was going to be.
Yeah. Continuing to expand and grow as well.
So I would believe that even in Europe, that the ability to have a strong grid is definitely there and can be taken and put into place fairly quickly. I don't know what the politics and the environmental regulations are, so I can't say that it is happening, but I can say that if a place like California, which is the most stringent regulatory area of the United States and one of the most stringent regulatory areas in the world, can put so much more robustness in their grid over the course of about 3 years, I'm sure that it can be done just about anywhere.
I agree. Jesse, can you throw up a picture called Tesla Motors? And what we're going to do is spend a little time talking about how close Tesla became or came to being called Faraday after struggling to obtain the trademark for the name. Tesla Motors was, the name was trademarked originally in 1994 by a man named Brad Sewart, who was unwilling to sell to Tesla when they approached him in 2004. They wanted Tesla Motors as the domain. And you know, this story resonates with me. In 1994, we saw the internet coming online quickly, kind of like AI is now.
Sure.
And we knew that we needed to nail down our domain, Gruber.
Yes.
So back then you went to internet, you did a search, and you found out, it's already taken. All right.
Yeah.
Well, rather than stop there, we did some research and we found out there was a John Gruber at a university in the Midwest that had registered the name. And before the age of the internet, it was a little difficult figuring out, how to contact this individual, but we finally got a hold of him. And I spoke with him and I said, we're Gruber Industries and a number of Gruber divisions. And it would sure be nice if we were able to nail down that domain for our companies. And you know what he said? He didn't say, I want $1 million for the domain. You need to pay me. I'm going to keep it. He said, you're absolutely right, Mr. Gruber. I realized when I took that domain because of my last name, John Gruber, that eventually A business was going to come along looking for it, and this really belongs in the business domain. I'm more than happy to give you the domain Gruber.
Oh my gosh, I did not know that.
We sent him, of course, some trinkets and gifts and thanked him profusely, and that's how we got our domain. Now, having said that, here's what Tesla had to go through. They almost called themselves Faraday. The original holder of Tesla Motors, the trademark, refused to sell it to us. And this is something Elon said on Twitter at one point. So what we did was we sent the nicest person in the company to sit on his doorstep until he at least talked to us and said yes. Now, I think at this point, Elon, probably fully aware of his personality, realized that he didn't quite fit into the category of the nicest person at Tesla, and decided in order to be effective here, I'm going to have to take a back seat and send somebody else. So they did. It turns out that after sitting on the porch or whatever they did, he was finally relinquished the domain name and charged him $75,000, which might seem like a bargain considering Tesla's current market cap at around $60 billion. The name Faraday was eventually then used by a rival electric car startup established in 2014. And I believe Faraday's still around.
I think they are. I think they're one of the struggling ones that hasn't put out a car yet.
Yeah, they had a magnificent prototype car, which looked like a Lamborghini, basically. You know, the wedge-shaped design with the scoops on the side and all that. But that never quite went anywhere. So then it turns out Tesla Motors eventually shortened its name to just Tesla in 2017. But also faced difficulties obtaining the website address for Tesla.com. The purchase of that domain cost them, remember, $75,000? This one cost them $11 million, and it took over a decade to secure.
Do you remember, as we were first working with Tesla, that everything was on the Tesla Motors site?
I do remember that, yes.
And eventually they went to Tesla.com, yes.
So the reason for renaming the company to just simply Tesla was to reflect that it no longer just made vehicles, but also offered manufactured solar panels at that time, batteries, and software.
Yes.
Looks like we've got more question.
Nope, that's one that we've actually answered already.
All right. One of our groups here that does podcasts has a Did You Know session, and I thought I'd try one of those.
Okay.
I've got a Did You Know for you here. Did you know that 500 Roadsters were delivered in 2008?
I knew that Roadsters began being delivered in 2008. I did not know that 500 exactly were delivered in 2008.
And speaking of 500, the last Roadster, or the 500th Roadster, was the last 1.5 Roadster.
Yes.
And that's currently in California. It was originally painted a custom Lotus color called copper, and it is now being repainted. It got into a fender bender.
Oh, I hope they can keep the copper color. That's such a pretty color. I've seen the pictures of that Roadster.
Yeah, it was a one of, and it's a salvage car to boot. So it's a salvage car again because it's been in another accident.
Now, isn't this particular car the one that became a salvage car because something, road debris came up off the road and up through the floor panel and created, like a softball-sized hole. Mm-hmm. And the driver, the owner at the time, took it, went ahead and put the insurance claim in. And since insurance didn't know what it would take to fix it, said, no, we're just going to total the car.
Well, they took it to a Tesla service center at the time. And, there's a certain level of expertise in doing an appraisal on damage to a vehicle. And, Tesla was small at the time. So they said, well, it looks like the whole frame needs to be replaced. And once the insurance company saw the cost for that, they said, "Oh no, this is a loss.
Okay.
We need to total this car." So what the owner did was, it was a brilliant move. He bought it back.
Yeah.
And he ended up taking it down to a sheet metal shop and had a piece of aluminum plate pop riveted on that hole. You know, they flattened it and put the carpet back over it, and
it was fine.
It's as good as new.
Yeah, because there was no real frame damage.
No, none at all. It was a piece of pipe that fell off of a landscaper's truck and was bouncing around in the freeway, and he was trying to avoid it in traffic. And
that's right, and it came up and it
punctured
hit that.
All right, we have a customer that was that had a bricked Roadster. This was back in McLean, Virginia, and this is a car that's currently on our Roadster matchmaking site for sale. It ended up being bricked. She also had a problem in the PEM, and she decided to wait for Tesla to replace the battery. They did, found the PEM was defective, replaced the PEM as well.
Okay.
And then I had contacted her, and I said, so how's the car running? She says, well, it is actually, let me read you her exact comment. VIN 892 is in great shape, new battery and PEM, but suffering from loneliness. We'll be listing it for sale soon. So it is out on our site now. It's the first one on the Roadster matchmaking site because we put the newest ones. They rise to the top. And it is a great car. And let me tell you a number of reasons for that. It has, of course, a $45,000 battery in it, which is what it costs now with tax to get a battery replaced. It also has an $8,500 PEM, which is what Tesla charges for a power electronics module. Now, these aren't new. These are new out of stock sometimes, and they have some deferred maintenance in them, but it's still better than the one she had, which was broken.
Right.
So if you do the math, she's asking $125,000. That makes this a $72,000 500 car, $72,500.
Well, that's right about market rate.
It's market rate for cars that don't have a new battery.
Yeah.
So for anybody looking for a Roadster that is fully functioning at this point, that has just had the battery replaced months ago, this may be your car.
Yes. We have a comment here from Rex Cunningham. I think it has to deal with the story about the Gruber domain. He says, it's always about paying it forward, Pete. That's a great story, but be willing as well in sharing for the future of the EV platforms where it's needed. Love the chat. Love your show, by the way.
Well, thank you for joining us. Yes, you're right. We are a firm believer in paying it forward, and also one of our viewers who often chimes in, kindness is always free.
Yes. Yes. And so we definitely do ascribe to that. We want to make sure that as we do things, that we're doing things that are beneficial to the community and are not inadvertently harmful to the community. That's going to be one of the reasons that we don't have the GPT out, for example, right now.
Mm-hmm.
There's too much unknown.
Right. Looks like we've got a sunglass question. Tenacious Turtle says, Turtle E, calm down, guys. Neo isn't here. All right. So staying with this Roadster for Sale program, and by the way, again, it's absolutely free. There is no expiration date. The listings remain until your car is sold. And the best part is you get to talk to the potential buyers directly. We're not involved in financial transactions. We're the Tinder of the Roadster world. We unite buyers with sellers. There are no restrictions. Feel free to advertise your car locally or any other platforms if you've listed with us. And feel free to use our listing link for images.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're putting it into your local newspaper or whatever, you can provide a link to the website where your listing is, and that gives people the full picture.
Yeah, I mean the idea is we are going to try to do what we can to help you sell your car.
Precisely. And if your car is here, which some of the ones that are for sale are, that happens in a variety of ways. It turns out that the car was too expensive to repair, for example, after it got here. It turns out that the owner was going to sell it anyway, but then decided, you guys take wonderful pictures, you create the listings, and here's where it gets interesting. If you leave your car here in our shop, we have a number of people that come by to look at Roadsters for sale. It's kind of like a dealer showroom floor.
Mm-hmm.
We also have the ability to allow people to do test drives if you agree. even if your car has expired plates or doesn't have insurance, because we're a dealer and we put a dealer plate on it. Now your car is fully insured, it's road legal, and whoever comes to potentially buy your car can take it out for a test drive.
Right.
Many people have sold their Roadsters in our service center due to test driving. They get familiar with a car. They can check it out. They can look underneath. They can do all kinds of things. Versus being remote and having to fly in and take a look at the car, which gets expensive. So, again, these are all free services, and we have a number of people that avail themselves of this free service, including our photography team, social media, taking pictures of the vehicle and detailed pictures, the kind that helps sell the car.
Right.
All right. We've got another picture here, Jesse. It's VIN 168. This is a Tesla Roadster that is in Emborg, Belgium. It's a 2009. It is for sale. And it's a signature Roadster. In Europe, the signature cars number 250. In the U.S., it was only 100. So this car will have a carbon fiber plaque, and it will say signature 250 of, or signature 168 of 250.
Mm-hmm.
This car has a CAC of 134, charges to 162 miles range, or 260 kilometers, glacier blue, of course. And here's the information that the seller supplied. VIN number 168 is the first signature 250 sports Roadster to be delivered in Belgium. It is also the first glacier blue Roadster to arrive in Belgium, so it has a couple of firsts.
Mm-hmm.
It arrived at his home by truck January 27th of 2010, at a time when Tesla had no facilities on the European continent. The first inspections were carried out at my place by a Tesla Ranger who came from Hethel, UK, with a workshop van. This Roadster is the most exciting car I've ever driven. I'm still first owner, but due to vision problems, he was born in 1932, he's decided not to drive anymore. And that explains why he was putting very little mileage on it. And what is the mileage, by the way? Let's go back up and look at that. It is
about 50,000 kilometers, 31,000 miles.
31,000 miles exactly. Yep. He did a few improvements to it. He's got a new audio system, a Blaupunkt Rome Europe car radio. He still has all of the original parts to put back in it if you wanted to restore it to completely original. He also had he had a log file pulled a few months ago, and he says that Gruber Motor Company conducted the log file test, and the engineer here said overall the car looks good based on log files. I'm not seeing anything that needs immediate attention. The car looks like it's always been charged to no more than 85%. All right, so there's a Roadster for you in Europe that's available for sale. One just sold at Very Orange in the UK, so
Yes.
they do sell periodically. We have another Roadster that's going to be listed soon. And Jesse, if you can bring up a for sale picture. Now, this is a well-known Roadster owner. This is not his car, by the way, but what I'm showing you there is the type of pictures that we're able to take of the cars. We have a banquet hall that's about 3 miles from us here, and what they have is about a 250 a circumference AstroTurf area with beautiful green, unobstructed grass, fake grass, of course.
Mm-hmm.
But it plays well with the Roadsters. And then there are cypress trees and palm trees in a circular fashion around the car. So virtually any angle you take a picture at is going to have a nice backdrop. That's usually where we take the pictures of the cars that are for sale for the customers that have their cars here. Makes a spectacular backdrop for the images. we always ask them for permission, and they've been very kind, letting us bring cars there. Sometimes I think we had a couple of them there together that we took pictures of a couple days or last week.
Oh, okay. I remember seeing the pictures of the VIN 3s, the Founders VIN 3 Model S and Founders VIN 3 Roadster that were taken on this very same lawn.
Yep. All right, we've got another picture to pop up, intake duct. And what I'm going to show you here is we continuously share Tesla Roadster aging issues. And this is one that we had not really considered in the past, but in the center there, what you'll see is the heater box, and then there is a duct. It's a neoprene duct that connects that heater box to that round flange area there that's kind of toward the top, circular. Well, these types of products, this is the same thing that they use for the PEM cooling fan. And as this type of rubber duct ages, you can see there's some fissures there. Mm-hmm. There's some holes, and it begins to unravel. There's another one there. This is an intake duct, so essentially if this has holes in it, what you're going to end up with is getting unfiltered or not very clean air getting into your cabin in the car. What we've begun to do is replace these, or at least advise customers that this is something else that can be replaced. In the rear, you have one that's a little larger than this. It's orange, and that is the PEM cooling fan duct. That one is vital because if you have cracks and fissures or the clamp has fallen off, by the way, this clamp here is stainless steel. This is what should have been used in the back. Instead, they were using nylon tie wraps, which after 15 years are brittle, break, and now you have, a cooling problem because your cooling is compromised, your CFM is down, and you're not getting the amount of cooling to the PEM that it needs.
Why would their engineers have done that? They know to use stainless steel. They're using stainless steel. Why would they have not thought of it?
Good questions, yes.
Wow.
In fact, if any of you out there were involved in the engineering of the Tesla Roadster, which oftentimes they are, that would be an interesting backstory. Why in the front of this duct did they use a stainless steel clamp combination? And why in the back was it a nylon tie wrap?
Yeah, especially when the one in the back is a vertical tube, so when you come disconnected, that tube is going to fall.
Drop. Yeah, it does. All right, so that's another area that we have been advising customers. If we're in that area working, it's an inexpensive item to replace and to update. All right, got another image. This one is VP. Are you there, Jesse? It's 2 orange Roadsters. And what I wanted to show you here, once the image pops up, this was a customer that had a signature green Roadster and decided that he might like very orange better. So he ended up converting or wrapping the car in the foreground to very orange, but they didn't quite get the color perfect. So what we're showing there is the one in the foreground is a bit darker than the factory paint, very orange, that's in the background.
Right.
And
it's a very pretty wrap, but you're right, it's not truly the very orange. Now, obviously, in almost all cases, you're not going to have a very orange Roadster parked next to another very orange Roadster.
To be able to tell. Yes,
to be
exactly.
able to tell.
The other advice here is pick your wrap vendors carefully. In this particular wrap, they actually wrapped over the carbon fiber.
Oh, really?
And, carbon fiber needs to come off, first of all, every 7-8 years or so, unless it was too far gone and it would have needed a repaint, so they decided, let's just wrap over the
that
fiber.
might be a possibility.
All right, so I have another did you know for you. Did you know that at the time, the $112,000 Roadster was the most expensive single prize ever offered on The Price is Right? And it was in 2010 on Earth Day that they actually had that as a prize. Fortunately, no one won it, so they weren't out $112,000.
I did not know that.
Mm-hmm.
Wow. And so and they said what it was on the golden wheel. That was one of the really high-end prizes that people could potentially get.
Most likely, yeah. Yeah, I remember watching that as a kid.
Wow.
All right. Now, here's another historic tidbit. And this is from some insiders at Tesla that were there during the early days, the first couple, 300 employees or so. They said that at one point, right, Elon stood up on a stairwell at Palo Alto, and he told them all in an all-hands-on-deck type meeting, first, it's the Dark Star. The Dark Star was a code name for the Roadster. Then it's going to be the White Star. That was the code name for the Model S.
Mm-hmm.
And then the car for the masses. So it looks like Elon had that vision all along. He saw the future. He saw that, we needed to convert everybody away from ICE engines and have a car for the masses, kind of like the Volkswagen was back in its day. Then he says, we will be the first trillion-dollar company. Now, bear in mind, this must have been around 2007, 2008 or so.
Right.
And at that point in time, billionaires were infrequent. There weren't very many of them. Trillion was probably unfathomable at the time.
Yeah, there were a company that had $100 billion in value was going to be one of the largest 25 companies in the world in all likelihood.
Yeah, yeah. And the GDP of some countries didn't even get to those levels.
Right.
So, but he said that we will be the first trillion-dollar company and we will save the planet. And what they pointed out was his ambition was contagious. Another one, there has often been some discussion about Roadster parts being thrown away.
Yes.
Well, there was a reason for that, apparently. Someone was hired, and she bought way too many Roadster parts from Sotira, for example. Sotira was a French company that made the body panels for the Tesla Roadster. Think about that. Those are fairly large. There's a lot of storage requirement, shipping, of course, to get it from France to the U.S., and also PEMs, way overbought. Later, they threw them all away, filling dumpsters.
Oh,
and you hear some of the old people talking about that, Oh, yeah, I remember the dumpsters were, full of Roadster parts.
And that was inexperience. I won't even say short-sightedness. I think that's just inexperience. People who don't understand that these Roadsters might be around for longer than they anticipated.
Mm-hmm. Well, here's another quote from some of the people that were there in the early days. They also did molds, injection molding, plastics, all interior pieces, and those are done in Korea, apparently.
Mm-hmm.
And the quote was, I have been there 12 years, and I remember Roadster. When we closed the program down, we thought we had covered our bases. We bought a 4 to 5 year supply in 2010.
Wow.
Well, of course, they would have run out by 2015.
Sure. Sure. Wow.
So, we've got more to cover here, but we can save that for the next time. And the final thing that I want to leave you with is we get a lot of requests to update the Tesla Roadster census. And there were some more updates done this morning. We really appreciate you in the community keeping that updated. I know Gruber needs to do a better job of weeding out some of the duplicates, and we're always looking for staff to do that. But in the meantime, you can do your part by continuously updating us, like that customer that just bought that Roadster at auction in UK, gave us the new location for the Roadster. And, the other day I typed in something Roadster related, and the first thing that popped up on Google was Tesla Roadster census. So it's getting some play. It's getting traction.
That's good. That's good.
Again, we thank everyone for joining us. The Tesla Roadster podcast is done every Tuesday at 11 a.m. Tomorrow is the AI podcast at 10 a.m. It's not for the faint of heart. We go down rabbit holes. We cover topics that are controversial. Friday morning is our Gruber Power Services podcast, and Monday is the Gruber Communications podcast done by different teams. Again, at 10 a.m. Mountain Standard Time. This is the only one that deviates 11 o'clock Mountain Standard Time on a Tuesday.
Oh, that's because at 10 a.m. on Tuesday, we have the General EV podcast.
Right, and we segue.
So thank you guys so much for joining us today.
See you next time.